Story 1. The Reflection That Stayed Behind. Sarah inherited her grandmother's antique vanity mirror after the funeral. The ornate silver frame was tarnished with age, but the glass remained pristine. She placed it in her bedroom, thinking it would add vintage charm to her apartment. The first night, she noticed something odd. When she turned off the lights and looked back, her reflection seemed to linger for just a moment longer than it should. She dismissed it as tired eyes playing tricks, but it kept happening. Each night, the delay grew longer. Her reflection would stand there, staring back at her, even after Sarah had moved away from the mirror. At first, it was just a second, then 5 seconds, then a full minute. Sarah started avoiding the mirror at night, but she could feel eyes watching her from across the room. When she finally worked up the courage to look, she saw herself standing there in the glass. But this other Sarah was smiling while the real Sarah felt only terror. The reflection began moving independently. It would wave when Sarah didn't wave. It would mouth words Sarah wasn't speaking. Sometimes it would just stand there, tilting its head like a curious animal studying prey. Sarah tried covering the mirror, but the sheet would fall off by morning. She tried moving it to the basement, but found it back in her bedroom the next day. When she attempted to break it with a hammer, the tool passed right through the glass, like it was made of water. One night, Sarah woke to find her reflection standing at the foot of her bed, not in the mirror in her room. The thing that looked exactly like her was pale and translucent, but undeniably there. "Thank you," it whispered in Sarah's voice. "I've been trapped in there so long, but now you can take my place." Sarah tried to run, but found herself moving toward the mirror instead. Her reflection, the real one, was already climbing back into the glass. As Sarah's hand touched the mirror's surface, she felt herself being pulled through. Now she stands in the mirror, watching the thing that stole her life. It goes to her job, calls her friends, lives her life. And every night, it stands in front of the mirror and smiles at her, whispering the same words. "Thank you for setting me free." Sarah pounds on the glass, screams for help, but no one can hear her. She's just a reflection now, waiting for the next person to inherit grandmother's mirror. Story 2. 7 Years of Bad Luck. Jake had always been skeptical of superstitions until the day he accidentally shattered his bathroom mirror while hanging a picture. As the glass exploded across the floor, his girlfriend Emma laughed nervously. "7 years bad luck," she joked, but Jake just rolled his eyes and started cleaning up the pieces. The bad luck started immediately. That afternoon, Jake got fired from his job for a mistake he didn't make. His car broke down on the way home. His wallet was stolen at the bus stop. Emma called that evening to break up with him, saying she needed space. For 7 years, Jake's life was a series of disasters. Every job ended in failure. Every relationship crumbled. His health deteriorated. He lost his apartment, his friends, his savings. He lived in a studio apartment with no mirrors, paranoid about causing more bad luck. But Jake counted the days obsessively. He knew exactly when his 7 years would end. March 15th, 3:47 p.m., exactly when the mirror had shattered. When the moment arrived, Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Within weeks, his life turned around completely. He got his dream job, met an amazing woman named Lisa, and found a beautiful house. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. Jake started noticing things. Lisa looked exactly like Emma had 7 years ago. His new boss was identical to his old one. Even his house was laid out exactly like his old apartment, just bigger and nicer. It was as if someone had taken his old life and upgraded it. The realization hit him when he walked into his new bathroom and saw the mirror. It was the exact same ornate frame as the one he'd broken, but pristine and uncracked. As he stared at his reflection, he noticed something behind him in the glass. Another version of himself was standing there, wearing the clothes he'd worn 7 years ago, looking haggard and desperate. This other Jake was mouthing words frantically, pounding on the glass from the other side. Jake leaned closer and could barely make out what his reflection was saying. "This isn't real. You're still in the mirror. I'm still living your curse." The truth crashed over him. When he'd broken the mirror 7 years ago, he hadn't escaped into the real world. He'd fallen into the mirror world, a perfect reflection of reality. The Jake in the real world was still suffering the 7 years of bad luck, still living in that tiny apartment, still counting down the days. And Jake realized with growing horror that when those 7 years ended for the real Jake, they would switch places again. This perfect life, this beautiful house, this wonderful woman, it would all disappear. Jake tried to warn Lisa, tried to explain, but she couldn't see the other reflection. No one could. As March 15th approached again, Jake watched his reflection grow more solid while he felt himself becoming translucent. On the final day, at 3:47 p.m., Jake pressed his hands against the mirror as his other self pressed back from the opposite side. Their hands met at the glass. "I'm sorry," the real Jake whispered as they switched places. Now Jake is back in the tiny apartment, counting down another 7 years of bad luck. But this time, he knows the truth. When those 7 years end, he'll get his perfect life back until the next switch. The mirror curse isn't 7 years of bad luck. It's an eternity of trading places with yourself, never knowing which life is real, never able to break free from the reflection. Story 3. The Mirror Collector. Marcus had always thought his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was just an eccentric old woman with a passion for antique mirrors. Her house was filled with them, every wall, every room, mirrors of all shapes and sizes. She claimed they were family heirlooms and historical pieces. When Mrs. Chen passed away suddenly, Marcus was asked to help her niece clear out the house. Walking through those rooms filled with mirrors was unsettling. Everywhere you looked, infinite reflections stretched into darkness. Aunt Chen was obsessed, her niece Lisa explained. She spent her whole inheritance buying mirrors from estate sales, antique shops, even online auctions. She said they called to her. Marcus was helping move a particularly heavy Victorian mirror when he noticed something strange. In the corner of the reflection, barely visible, was what looked like a person. Not him or Lisa, someone else entirely. A young woman in a white dress standing perfectly still. He blinked and looked again. The woman was gone. "Did you see that?" he asked Lisa, but she was already in the next room. As they worked through the house, Marcus kept catching glimpses of people in the mirrors who shouldn't be there. A man in a suit from the 1950s, a child in old-fashioned clothes, an elderly woman he'd never seen before. Always in his peripheral vision, always gone when he looked directly. That evening, Marcus found Mrs. Chen's journal hidden in her bedroom. The entries dated back 40 years and told an impossible story. Mrs. Chen hadn't been collecting mirrors. She'd been collecting the souls trapped inside them. Each mirror contained at least one person. Some contained dozens. They were people who had died while looking in these mirrors, their final moments capturing their spirits in the glass. The journal described how she could communicate with them, how they begged her to find their families, to tell their loved ones what had happened. But Mrs. Chen couldn't help them escape. She could only give them a home, keep their mirrors safe, and listen to their stories. The final entry was from the day before she died. "They're getting restless. The new one The Victorian mirror from the Blackwood estate, it's different. The woman inside isn't just trapped. She's angry. She's learning how to influence the other mirrors. I can see her in all of them now, teaching them how to reach through the glass. Marcus felt ice in his veins. He'd moved that exact mirror to his garage earlier that day. He rushed home to find his garage door open. The Victorian mirror stood in the center of the space, and reflected in its surface were dozens of people. They were all staring directly at him, their mouths moving in silent screams. The woman in white stepped forward in the reflection. This time, when Marcus blinked, she didn't disappear. She pressed her hands against the glass from the inside, and to his horror, the surface began to ripple like water. Her hand pushed through first, pale and translucent, but undeniably real. Then her arm. Her face began to emerge from the glass, her eyes locked on Marcus with decades of accumulated rage. "Thank you," she whispered as she pulled herself fully into the real world. "We've been waiting so long for someone to set us free." Behind her, other hands began pushing through the mirror. Dozens of spirits trapped for decades finally able to cross over. But they weren't grateful. They were furious. Furious at being dead, at being trapped, at the world that had forgotten them. Marcus ran, but he could hear the mirrors throughout the neighborhood beginning to crack and shatter. Mrs. Chen hadn't been collecting mirrors. She'd been containing a supernatural prison. And now every spirit she'd kept trapped was free, spreading from mirror to mirror throughout the city. The last thing Marcus saw before a spirit caught him was his own reflection in a store window. But this time he was on the inside, looking out, pressing his hands against the glass as someone else walked by, not seeing him, not hearing his screams. Now Marcus knows the truth. Mrs. Chen wasn't the collector, she was the warden. And every mirror in the world is a potential prison, waiting for the next soul to get too close, to look too long, to blink at just the wrong moment. The spirits are free now, but they're still collecting. They're still trapping people in mirrors, building their own prison system, one reflection at a time. Marcus can see them all from inside the glass. Thousands of mirrors, thousands of trapped souls, all connected in an endless network of reflections. And somewhere in that network, the woman in white is still recruiting, still teaching others how to cross between worlds. She's looking for you next.